We're going to travel a little bit, so should be a lot of fun. Our speaker is Ewald Grabher, and Ewald's he's an interesting guy. He works as a guide for Silver Creek Outfitters, and then he also does some traveling and takes people fishing in Slovenia, which is what he's going to talk about tonight. So we're going to hear about fishing in Slovenia. And the other thing that Ewald, he's got some music stuff in his background. He plays the harmonica, and he participates most years, I guess, up in the festival up in the Pine Featherville area in the first week of August. And that's also a good event to go to if any of you are looking for a music event to go to in the summertime. All right, so with that, we bring up Ewald, and he's going to talk to us about fishing in Slovenia. So let's join me in welcoming Ewald. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Bruce. Quick correction: it's not Pine Featherville; it's Yellow Pine.
Yellow Pine.
It's in a kind of geographic heart of the middle of nowhere of the world. In Idaho, and it's a little mining town with 36 people population, and they put on this festival every summer, and it's fun. So highly recommend it. Okay, you stole my speech. Bruce, any idea where my speech went? That little white paper? Yeah. Somebody took it. I found it. Got it. Okay. I can try and wing it, but then it'll be 4 hours instead of 45 minutes. Well, good evening. Thank you, Trout Unlimited, for inviting me to do this speech, and thank you especially for Bruce and Amanda to helping me in this preparation for this trip. Appreciate it very much. Makes life a lot easier when you have some wingman around you. Tonight I want to talk a little bit about Slovenia. And first introduce myself. My name is Ewald Grabher. I'm Austrian, so I was born and raised in Austria. And I've been fly fishing all my life, so there's a lot of streams in the Alps. Fly fishing is popular, and I came here to Sun Valley first time in 1981 when I was a little boy, when my parents brought me to visit my uncles that have been living in Sun Valley since the 60s, so they've been here forever. And I immediately fell in love with the abundance of nature and the endless fly fishing opportunities. I remember the story. I was like a little boy, you know, and how you lose the patience after 5 minutes not hooking up a fish. And we were out Warm Springs and tossing night crawlers in there. So I admit, I've sinned. And I got patient. I don't catch a fish, I don't catch a fish, you know. My uncle said, you know what, I'll give you $5 for every trout you catch. Well, 20 minutes later, I limited out. Once I grew older in the 90s, I started visiting here and spent weeks of time in the summers here, and I can only imagine what was my favorite activity that I did in the outdoors here. So I'll leave that up to you, your guess. It was not until 20 years ago when I met a girl that I am lucky now to call my wife that made me decide to take the big step and decide to move here permanently. It took me a while to get the paperwork, but as soon as I was established, first thing I did is I went to Silver Creek Outfitters and applied for a job. Here I am. Guide for Terry has already been mentioned for full-time in the summer, and then in the winter I teach ski and snowboard for Sun Valley. Every year in April, when the mountain closes, I travel back to my old home and spend a couple of months there and taking the opportunity to fish one of my all-time favorite fly fishing destinations in the world. I actually take people here, so I have a little company and host fully guided trips to Slovenia, and we can talk about it all, answer questions after my presentation. I'm happy to answer all your questions. If I would have to name one single reason why I stand in front of here today, I have to say, or want to say, it was Slovenia. Slovenia changed my life. I remember very well that moment when I got invited to fish it, and nobody knew about it, but very few people, because Slovenia was Eastern Europe, behind the Iron Curtain, Yugoslavia, so we in the West, it was a myth. And I got lucky that a Slovenian that lived in my hometown was a friend with my dad. Some of his buddies canceled, and so I got to go as the new kid on the block. And the first time I saw those emerald green waters, those colors, something changed in me, and I was never the same person again. And long story short, here I am. That's the reason why I'm here. My fly fishing passion just reached a totally new level. I was just a so-so fisherman here and there, but when I saw those waters, I go, oh my God, this is heaven on earth. Well, let's talk about a little bit about Slovenia. By the way, if you have any questions that relate to the image or what I just talked about, please feel free to stop me. I will answer. For other questions, I will happy to answer all those at the end of the presentation. So Slovenia, surrounded by Austria, Hungary, Italy, and Croatia, Slovenia used to be a province of former Yugoslavia and became a country when it declared its independence from Yugoslavia during the civil war in 1991. This makes it one of the youngest countries in the world. Nestled between the eastern half of the Alps and the Adriatic coast, it has indeed the appearance of a small kingdom in a fairy tale movie. So we see castles, and it's literally Princess Bride movie. They must have gotten inspired in Slovenia for that movie and the setup. Well, through the middle runs the rivers, especially the Solcha, that carry the glacial waters from the highest peaks to the Mediterranean Sea. The food and the culture reflects a mix of the surrounding countries. So you can get everything from pizza, to goulash, to Wiener Schnitzel. And of course they have their own food, but it depends. The closer you get to the borders of the bordering countries, the more you see that influence of those cultures. Here, my favorite dessert, the Kobaritski Strukli. Yeah, once you have one, you're hooked for life. It's a dumpling, it's a curd dumpling with a lot of butter in it. Slovenia is only about half the size of Switzerland, and it has a population of only about 2.5 million people. You can easily drive across the country in your car in about 2 hours. Its capital city is Ljubljana, and it is definitely worth a visit. The cobblestone streets and the abundant cafes and restaurants in the center invite to relax and inhale the fresh air and the smell of the Slovenian food. In Slovenia, education, including college and university, is free to everyone. And Slovenia is the first country in the world that changed its constitution and declared all water a public property, to ever ban it from becoming a commodity. 35% of the entire country's area is under some natural protection. One of the oldest national parks in Europe also is in Slovenia, and I'll mention it later. Slovenia has a long living history when it comes to fly fishing. Former Yugoslavian's president Tito was an avid fly fisherman, and that reflects in the people that live along the rivers and lakes. They have always maintained a strong connection with the environment and have been taking great care of it. The combination of intact nature, perfect climate, a philosophy that makes it the best fly fishing destination in Europe and one of the best in the world. The landscapes range from glaciers and high mountain peaks, rolling hills and forests all the way to the coast, where one can enjoy a wine tasting after a long day of fishing. Agriculture is a big part of Slovenia's economy, and wine is one of the major crops. The varieties of water range from small alpine creeks, big freestone rivers, we got a tailwater, spring creeks, and lakes of all kinds and size. In combination, I'm going backwards here. Oh, there we go. So this is the Radovna River, and this is the source of the river. The eastern Alps are mostly limestone, and so they're very porous, and a lot of the water, the snowpack, seeps into the ground and reemerges and creates springs like this are really not uncommon in Slovenia. A lot of rivers, we call them source rivers, have an origin like this. The combination of this with the available fish species, including brown trout, brook trout, rainbows, grayling, and TUH, which is the alpine version of the Mongolian taimen, so it's the same fish. It's often called the Danube salmon, but it's a misleading term because it's not a salmon, it's a char, like the bull trout. So it's the same really species, and yes, we have those fish in the Alps. Not everybody knows, now you do. With all this combination of this perfect landscapes and beautiful rivers and all these species available, on top of them all, Slovenia's most famous trout, the marble trout, and I will talk about it later, makes Slovenia a true fly fisherman's dream. Since 2004, Slovenia is a member of the European Union. The national language is Slovene, and the currency is the euro. There is no passport or border control if you enter from Austria or Italy. It is one of the safest countries in Europe to travel. English is frequently spoken. Slovenia has a lot of history, and one big part is its role in the First World War. The Socha Valley was the second largest front line in the First World War, and 5 battles were fought between the Austrians and the Italians there. Most trenches still exist and can be visited on your hikes. Even Ernest Hemingway came through here when he was stationed in Italy as an ambulance driver. And you gotta know, when Ernest Hemingway shows up, the fishing's gonna be good, right? He came through the Socha Valley, and the area inspired him for his novel, The Farewell to Arms, that actually takes place in the Socha Valley. All right, let's talk about the fishing. All fishing, other than in the States, in Europe, is in private hands, more or less. So it's a totally different setup and mentality. Slovenia is lucky that they have a fisheries institute, which compares closely to like the fish and game here. But it's separated from the government, so they do their own thing. They're more scientifically based, and that creates a wonderful setup for the rivers. So the rivers are happy, the culture is great, and everybody's happy, or at least they strive for that. The other half of the waters is managed by private entities or clubs, but most, if not all of the waters in Slovenia are accessible to the public. You buy a daily permit, and that depends on the river or the section of the river you want to fish. You pick for that day, you buy the specific license. So it's not like here where you buy one license and you just go where you want. You have to make your pick. Most fisheries allow harvest, even if they're fly fishing only. There are, however, many designated catch and release rivers or segments of such. The fish population is usually a mix of wild and native fish and stocked rainbows, which do not interbreed with any of the European native species. And the rainbows are there for entertaining the people that want to harvest fish, because it is way more popular amongst European anglers than it is here. One good thing to know about fishing in Slovenia is that the continental divide runs through the country. And you see here this Z-shaped mountain range, so that's where the continental divide happens, and to the west is only the Socha River with all its tributaries runs to the west and hosts the marble trout. The marble trout is not found in any of the rivers in the east. In the east we find regular brown trout, which is actually, and I'm gonna just say right now so I don't have to go back into it later, the marble trout is a substrain, it's its own substrain of brown trout, so genetically they're identical. But over whatever tens of thousands of years, the marble trout created its own little substrain, and it would interbreed with the brown trout. And there is a history about it back to the First World War, when the soldiers were starving. They were just completely eradicating the fish population in the Socha River, throwing hand grenades in there because they were starving. So there was no more fish left after the war, you can imagine. And the Fisheries Institute restocked the Socha River, not knowing that the marble and the brown are the same species. So they started interbreeding and creating hybrids. And later they found that out. So they poisoned the river and wiped it completely out, found genetically pure strains in some very remote, high tributaries, and started restocking the river with pure strain marble trout. And this effort is still ongoing. So, but the hybrids are as good as eradicated, and so there's a lot of history in between. Back to the rivers in the east, instead of the marble trout, you can find the houhen there. So the houhen is, like many people believe, not an anadromous fish. It's a domestic fish like a brown trout. So they only migrate for spawning, but other than that, throughout the year, they pick their hole, and that's where they live, that's where they feed, that's where you get them, if you get them. And in Slovenia, there's quite a few rivers where you can get them, and they can grow pretty large. The best time to fish for houhen is from early fall, when water levels drop, all the way through winter into February, when the season closes for spawning, which takes place between March and May. So when we go over there, May, eventually we see, depends on the year, even some late spawners, but you're not supposed to target them because they're worn out. In some rivers where there are, they say you cannot use a streamer longer than 2 inches for that reason. So they're really protective of their species, is a great philosophy. The best rivers to catch houhen on a fly rod is the Sava Bohinka, the Sava Dolinka, and the Savinja rivers. Of the Sava Bohinka being the only of those 3 rivers mentioned that has the rule of fly fishing only. So you can only fish with a fly rod there. So it's one of my friends there, nailing a few trout. And in May we focus mainly on the other fish species. So there's grayling, there's rainbow trout and brown trout mostly. There's some chubs and other fish in there. And the Sava Bohinka originates in Lake Bohin, and therefore is most of the time crystal clear. So it's like a tailwater character. One of Europe's most famous spring creeks is also located in Slovenia, the Unica River. It is located further south, where the rolling hills give way to the agricultural flatlands. The Unica is a very unique entity. It emerges out of a cave and only runs for about 3 miles before the water starts seeping back into the aquifer, and after 5 miles, the river is completely disappeared. So it's just kind of a bowl, a depression in the landscape, in the flats, where the groundwater basically resurfaces and creates beautiful meandering stream. And here we got the, that's the source. Look like it wants to be. There we go. You can actually hire a guide and get into the cave for an 8-hour tour. And at some point there's a rowboat attached where you have to cross the river, and you row up the river inside the cave. So there's a gate in there after 100 yards that explains that, and definitely something to put on some bucket list. Another video here. This shows the Danica hatch. So the Danica is the European equivalent of the brown drake. It's actually a 1/4 inch bigger than the brown drake. So yeah, I hope you're not disturbed by all those anglers that are lined up on the bank there. And needless to say, when such hatches occur, not that the fish are easy to catch, but you know, that's when you get some nice fish and dry flies. It actually, the Unica River used to have the regulation in the upper part, dry fly fishing only. That was the rule. They changed it, so now you can fish nymphs as well. But in Slovenia, most of the rivers, when the Slovenians say fly fishing, they mean fly fishing. 1 fly only, no split shot, no indicator. So you have to tie your flight and the weight. You want them in different weights to get them down to where the fish sits. And sight fishing, sight nymphing, dry fly fishing, and stringer fishing are the methods. There's also a good population of grayling in the Unica River. Moving northeast, we meet the Krka River, another source river in the rolling hills that emerges out of a hillside, and then eventually joins the Sava River. A good mix of rainbows, browns, and grayling keep the skillful angler entertained here. After the Unica, we're gonna go back west, and we're gonna come to the town of Idrija. Idrija is a small industrial town and used to be a mining town that had the 2nd largest mercury mine in the world. And fun fact on the side is that most of its mercury ended up in Idaho, in the northern lakes, where they used it to extract the gold from the prospecting times. So very interesting fact. The mine is still there and can be visited. It's not operating anymore, but you can do a tour and do a couple-hour tour through the shafts, and it's definitely well worth a visit, you know, if weather conditions or whatever don't allow fishing. Above Idrija, we find the headwaters of the Idrica River, the largest tributary of the Solča River. The upper part is managed by the Idrija Fishing Club as a trophy fishery, and catch and release fishing is strictly enforced. Rainbows, graylings, and marble trout are the targets here. That one was caught on a size 20 blue-winged olive fry. Just thought it was worth mentioning it. So that's a nice marble there, also on a dry fly. At this point, I do want to mention and need to mention the finesse of the fishing. You know, it's like we all know, you know, with the fishing pressure and catch-release rules, that the fish are getting smart, and since it's a wild fishery, don't believe that these fish come easy and just volunteer to jump into your net. So a careful approach and a good fly selection definitely will help to get you to success. My personal preference is to sight fish, and I find a fish and I don't cast, I study the fish. I see if it's eaten, what it's eaten, how it's eaten, and make my one cast, or 2 or 3. Sometimes a fish allows you 100 casts. Every fish is different, so that's the fun part of it. But again, I guess the best investment is to hire a local guide. He'll put you on the fish and he'll know better how to do it. Like I said, I just love to just nail one and spend as much time as I need it till I spook it or I hook it. Of course, a good hatch can make the fish more greedy and less careful. But other than here in the Rocky Mountains, the hatches are less predictable as the weather changes constantly and you never know what the next day brings. Talking about weather, the Mediterranean climate is very humid and it doesn't really follow straight patterns. The weather can change anytime in any which way. Heavy fronts or local thunderstorms can happen anytime, and they will. Here's an example of what a river flow chart can look like. This is the Upper Idrica River last year in May over a period of 4 weeks. So you can see 5 major blowouts. And here's like a nice run. We checked out and then thunderstorm hit the wall, and then this is how it looked the next day. Well, thanks to the limestone nature of the Slovenian karst, the rivers don't color up easily, and if they do, they recover quickly from such blowouts. In fact, high water levels actually can present an opportunity to hunt for the very big and shy marble trout. Because once they grow bigger, they become predatory and generally only hunt in the twilight or the low light. And if the rivers are low and clear, it's probably more productive to just focus on regular fish, look for fish that are feeding on fries or nymphs. That's above the town of Idria, so they're really almost way up in the headwaters. And fish spotting is definitely a helpful skill to have. If I would have to nickname the Idrica River, I would probably call it the river of many faces. From source to the mouth, it changes its appearance almost on every turn. Riffles, runs, slow sloughs, deep pools, cliff walls, you name it. The Idrica has it all. The deep runs and the large pools hold many secrets that are not easily revealed. That and its many different species of fish that inhabit it makes it, to me, one of the most intriguing rivers in the world to fly fish.
Are any of the rivers floatable, or are they mostly walk and wade?
There is no fishing in any rivers out of a vessel on flowing water. On lakes and reservoirs, yes, but it's all walk and wade. And I'll come to that point again in a little bit. Thank you. Good question. While the Idrica Fishing Club manages the upper part of or half of the Idrica, which is about 30 miles long, give or take, the lower part is managed by the Tolmin Fishing Club, so the rules change a little bit. They allow more harvest and do more restocking, so you find more rainbows. And also closer to the mouth, the salmonoids are joined by different species. So there's some jobs, or here in the picture, this is a barbel. They migrate up in spring for their spawning, and we've seen it where there was no more gravel visible. There was just fish. So, and they can provide a pretty good battle on the fly rod, so they're fun fish. This image shows the confluence of the Idrica River with its last tributary, the Bača River. It's very small and provides a good alternative if the water levels on the Idrica or the Soč itself are above average. and you're looking for some waterable water where you not get swept away, or you just like smaller streams in general. And it's actually surprising what size of fish could come out of such a small stream. Just shortly downstream, the Idrica drains into Lake Solcha, the Solcha Lake, which actually is a reservoir, but they keep it on the same water level all the time because it's mostly mainly used for recreational purposes. In the inlet area of the lake, the Tolminka joins the Solcha River, a small and short and very often overseen gem. It stays usually more clear when the Solcha blows out and then the fish migrate up into it. Well, we finally arrived in the Solcha Valley. So now we're on the west side of the Continental Divide here, traveling down the Idrica. And the Solcha is rated the most beautiful trout stream in Europe and draws anglers and other recreational users from all around the world. It is home to the Solcha grayling, the marble trout, and rainbows that are frequently restocked and can be of impressive size. If you come here just to catch fish, you're kind of missing the point. The Solcha is all about its beautiful surroundings and its unique color combinations. Let's just have a few pictures here speak for themselves. The Solcha originates in the highest parts of the Triglav National Park, and I mentioned it earlier. It was established in 1924, makes it one of the oldest national parks in Europe. And again, the limestone, the rain, and especially the snow melt gets filtered by the limestone. So when there's runoff water, it still retains its clarity. I've seen the river in flood stage, and the visibility was still 4 feet or 5 feet. So it's incredible. It's something very unique. And we've seen fish rising. So it's very, very great feature of it. This video shows a tributary. It's the Korytnica River that joins the Solcha just above Polish. Not that hard to spot. The Solcha is also famous for its Class 5 whitewater action, and is not lesser known amongst kayakers and paddlers from all around. There are plenty of whitewater outfitters where you can arrange a trip, either Class 4 challenge or just a Class 2 boost cruise. So there's different sections that provide different levels of experience. It's actually a great way to explore the Solcha, even with a fly rod, by just renting an inflatable canoe. And like I mentioned earlier, there's no river where it's allowed to fish out of a watercraft, but you still can travel with it, bring your gear, and just pull over, get out, and that way you can get to sections of the river that are otherwise not that easy accessible, or you can just cover more of the rivers. It's a great way to spend some time on the Solcha. Oops, yeah, that was, let's try that again. That was it. It's like a little gnat that the fish came out for, so I couldn't even see the fly it ate. So there was no hatch going on, it was just a fish sitting there, probably a 22-inch rainbow, and just having fun. And of course I didn't have my fly rod on me then. In the headwaters near the entrance of the Three Gulf National Park, in my opinion, most beautiful tributary joins the Sulch River. It's small, but the scenery is just breathtaking there. And just because the stream is smaller than the Sulch doesn't really mean that the fish are. So there's a picture of it just shortly above the mouth, the confluence. It's a very short stream. It only goes up like 4 or 5 miles. You can see the valley. It just becomes a bowl immediately. It's a beautiful, crystal clear little mountain stream. And marble trout are abundant in this area. The marble trout can grow to some impressive sizes, but don't be fooled that they're easy to come by. They don't eat every day. They don't like sunlight much, and they know most of the flies by their manufacturer's name. But when it all plays together, a trophy fish could be the reward. So this one's actually out of the Idrica River, because the Idrica has some impressive big fish there. And this is the current record marble trout that's ever been caught on a fly rod. It tipped the scale at 49 pounds. Well, this is the end. I hope you enjoyed the presentation and I could stir some interest in Slovenia. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. You can do now if you have a few, and then I'll be around later. Thank you so much.
I notice everybody wearing waders, so in this fishing season, what's the average temperature of these waters?
Most of these, or all of these pictures were taken in May, since that's the time I traveled there. So all but like 2 or 3 pictures of this presentation were taken by myself. And it's just a runoff, and the water coming from the high mountain is still very cold. Although it's like Silver Creek setup. It's nice and hot out there, but then once you step in the water, you don't want to be limited. So in the summer, once you get into June, wet wading is definitely an option. So it's basically the same as here. You're gonna have to check the water temperatures. It depends on the river and on the section you fish.
If you were to open any of our fly boxes in the Wood River here, you'd see the caddis, the mayflies, the terrestrials.
Yes.
How much of the stuff that we use here locally would apply to Slovenia? Or would we find that we'd have to completely gear up again?
No, I have learned over the years, I'll just use my Bigwood River or my Rocky Mountain boxes. The flies, even they maybe name them different, they're a little different size. As we know, there's a lot of like attractor patterns, and they will all work. So there's all varieties of the caddis fly, and they're always predominant everywhere. So they're there too. You got the evening hatches, stoneflies, mayflies of all kinds of betas, midges.
Beetles, hoppers?
Everything, yeah. We never in Slovenia for some reason really did well with hoppers, but I blame just the time frame, because in May there just is no hoppers. So
Don't catch too much hoppers in here either.
yeah, exactly. So I'm sure they'll catch up. Terrestrials definitely is a big deal. Bigger fish, the marbles, once they get like 20-inch, 2 feet, they're just like bull trout. They just become completely predatory. And then, we're talking about 8-inch streamers and 10-weight rods. If you say, okay, I'm going in bigger, then you get up in dark, and if we want to take a shot at a big marble, we stumbled across them during the day, but usually they go hiding and sit in their pool and just don't want to be seen.
Okay, organize a trip, do some salesmanship here.
This is it. I have a few So we offer a basic arrangement, so a 1 week arrangement where we stay in 2 different locations. So we learned over the years that people don't want to move around 3-4 times during the week. And as I mentioned earlier, Slovenia is very small. You can get to any river you want in the country from a central location within 2 hours driving. So we have 2 locations that we love, the town, and so one's Idrija, where we stay, where we can access the Unica River within 40 minutes and then fish the Idrija, or the Sava Bohinka. It's very close to the Savinja, and then in Kobarid is our favorite town. It's only 3 miles from the Italian border, and about 40 or half an hour drive from the Bruda wine region. So if you see the picture earlier, where looks like Tuscany. So you can fish the morning, and then you drive down half an hour, have a little wine tasting and lunch in a vineyard, and come back for an afternoon session.
So the best months to go are?
I consider May and October, from a fishing standpoint, the best month. May because just after runoff, could be even during runoff. Fishing's good basically always through summer as well, but in the summer, you get a lot of other users on the water, the floaters, and once the water warms up, the locals will actually, just like here, swim in the big wood and tube it and whatever, do all that kind of stuff. Plus, the fishing shifts more to just early morning and in the evening. So the fish really become almost inactive throughout the day. So in May, we still have all the major hatches. So I would say our middle of June to middle of July, where we here explore like the best and most prolific hatches and the best activity, that's kind of in the middle of May till early or middle of June. Every year is a little different.
How many people can you accommodate at a time?
At this point, we can accommodate up to 6 guests at a time per week. But I'm trying to source local Slovenian guides, but I want to keep it as like a high-end boutique operation, and I want to know the guides and make sure that there's, that they're English and that there's no cultural language barrier, and that's where we're at right now.
What other Central or Southern European countries are close to being comparable to the quality that you just described?
I would say I've traveled them all. So Bosnia has some great fishing and very technical, but it is like they're famous for big railings, and then Croatia has some beautiful. One of my favorite spring creeks is the Gacka River in Croatia. Absolutely marvelous and a must if you have the time. And I know guides there that can set you up, and it's not that far down. There's great streams in Montenegro, but the big difference is all these other countries. Croatia has come around. It's been westernized, fishing culture established, but everything south of there, the fishing clubs are struggling with poaching and the mentality of the river, because they're just the rivers, that's just always the river provides what it does, and then all the trash goes in the river, because it's just, and it'll take another generation or 2, I think, for those countries to come along and provide that history. That's what makes Slovenia just so by far so much better, because of its philosophy. The people know about it. They don't touch the river. They know people come here for fly fishing. That's a very big deal in Slovenia, and that's why the management is great. I mean, like for an example, the Upper Idrija fishing club, they're really, it's a philosophy, not just money or whatever. They really love what they're doing, and there's actually a part of the river, one of the better parts is off limits to fishing. So they call it a fish protection zone, where fish actually are allowed to be fished and not have to look at every fly they see twice. So they can grow, and there's a couple of tributaries there, so where they use that part of the river as their hatchery. So there's great things where they once every few years they would electroshock one of those tiny tribs and get all those like small and medium fish out, and then they restock it with their own produced fry. So those little fish will need the fry, and then they would just throw those medium fish in the main river, and that way they use their own river for restocking. So they're all wild fish. It's a great concept, and yeah. So there's a lot to it.
What elevation are we talking about? And also, are the temperature gradients pretty comparable to here over the course of the
Yes and no. So the Cobra Rib, I think, is 600 feet above sea level, or 650. So and it's literally it's a 2-hour drive to Venice. So the climate is more humid. So the temperature doesn't fluctuate as much between night and day. But then at Mount Triglav it's 10,000 feet, it's a glacier, so it depends where you are in elevation, what the temperatures do. But yeah, it's definitely more milder because of the humidity and the Adriatic Gulf of the Mediterranean just being so close by.
Given the licensing permitting is good for a section of river or a river, do you guys wait until like morning of and check conditions before
Yes.
you submit to a license?
Yes. So again, there is the biggest entity in Slovenia is the National Fisheries Institute that just controls about half of the river, and like they're doing a fantastic job. And for every different river, you have to get that license for that day. So you pick in the morning or the night before, you look at the weather, you look at the water levels, and you make a plan, and that's when you buy the daily permit. And they're run somewhere between, let's roughly say between $50 and $100 just for the rod fee.
Yep.
Yeah. And then there's the Tolmin Fishing Club. That's like the biggest entity that let me see if I can go back to that slide because it's probably a little easier explained with the map. There it was. So I don't know if you can see, well, actually I like that other map almost better here, but you can't see, now you can't see well. So the Tolmin Fishing Club, the lease goes from the lower half of the Idrica, the Solcha, and this part is not fishable because that's so from below the confluence there's a dam, and all the water, literally all the water gets diverted into the pipeline system for hydropower production. So the riverbed below is basically biologically dead and just has water in it when it floods. There's some little seeping water, but don't really provide any quality fishing. So it's a Socha River up to about where it makes the kink and maybe halfway up. So that's their lease, and there's another few tributaries that they own it. So they offer like, I'll probably say 80 miles of water that you can get under one license. But yeah, that's the exception there. And they charge you a different price. You can actually get a catch and kill or a catch and release license. And of course they give you a little break on the catch and release license.
I really applaud you for the outstanding fishing management. My home country is Greece, and I've been going there since the early 1960s, and it's done nothing but decline because there's a mentality that God provides food for people from the sea, and they did nothing but take,
Yeah.
and it's really sad.
Yeah.
This is really refreshing to hear you.
Yeah, and that's where Slovenia stands out completely from all other former Yugoslavian countries, even including, or even Albania. You know, there's this big thing going on over there with the Vjosa River, you know, the big corps want to dam it for hydropower plant, you know, but it's a scam. It's just a money-making deal, and now there's opposition, and now they're about to declare the whole area a national park, and hopefully they'll succeed with that. But yeah, we've seen it. I mean, when on our first, like, almost 20 years back, we did exploring trips to Bosnia, like, and with the help of the Federation of Fly Fishers, with their European branch, because there is a bunch of fly fishing addicts in those countries. They love fly fishing. Serbia, there's a bunch of crazy guys that just go all over the fly fish, and they want to protect it, and they put a lot of money in making, you know, leasing waters and making fly fish only, and hire a cop that patrols the water, but it's impossible. The river, it's just a mentality. People don't know it's illegal. It's my river. Like, and I remember this on the not the Neretva, it was on the Pliva River, a beautiful spring creek, also a source where the water just gushes out, and it's like 3 or 4 springs that run together to a river, which is the size of the Salmon River, like within 100 yards. It's amazing just to see something like that. And then it turns into like Spring Creek style, meandering low river, and big railing sitting there. And you know, Kelly, my wife, she's hooked on, we take your pictures, and there's this farmer that, you know, watching us, and we take the picture, put the railing back, and he starts, like, what's going on, you know? And our buddy comes out, well, he couldn't understand why he would let that fish go.